Hey, this is Tony here, and today I'm going to show you Kepler, a free open source planet image processing software in prototype stage. And I'm going to run through some of the features. And so I'm going to start with a Saturn image. So let's go ahead and get started. So in this interface here, you can see a number of capabilities. There's the ability here on the top left to open and save your files. You can save whole project files with all the settings. You can import an existing project, again, with all the settings. You've got various previews and views and zoom levels for the image, and you've got a magnifier here. And then on the right-hand side, you see a series of tabs starting with wavelets, FFT sharpening. The idea with Kepler is it follows a fairly straightforward workflow. So for those that are maybe just getting started with planetary image processing, it kind of takes some of the complexity out of the process. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up an image, and I've got a fairly old Saturn image that's captured a couple of years ago. And so the first thing I can do is you see an original view and a process view. If I click here in the middle, you can see it actually shows a magnified view, which comes in handy when you're trying to determine levels of noise or any artifacts that you might see in the image. I can also mouse wheel up on this view, see a little bit more detail as well. Now you notice that the rings are kind of going top to bottom vertical. So the first thing I'll do is I'm going to click here to rotate the image by about 90 degrees. There we go. So it's a little bit better view. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to go into the Wavelet tab. So let's get started. We want to start with the sharpening process for this image file. That was basically a result of a video taken that was then stacked and aligned in order stackered that produced the image file. So first I'm going to select auto size filter. What that means is when I run these sliders here, these sharpening sliders, we'll take this to about midway here. We don't want to over sharpen. And then maybe the layer 2 to about half of that level, and then layer 3 to another half level. So we've got some nice sharpening in there, maybe a little bit over sharpened, but we'll leave it like this for now. Definitely encourage you to play around with Kepler for yourself. The next thing that we can do, or I'll call out, is there are different convolve methods for your sharpening, different color models you can select. I'm just keeping all the defaults here. That seems to be work best for me. So the next thing is we're going to go over to the FFT sharpening, denoising. And so what we want to do is we want to try and reduce some of the noise that we've introduced into the image from the sharpening process. So what I can do is I can enable FFT denoise. And then interestingly, there's a button here that says auto denoise. I'm going to click on that. And you see straight away the noise is reduced. It's not optimal. So this auto denoise is just really a starting point for you to put you in the right direction. What I like to do on this vertical bar here is slide this over a little bit, maybe to around, let's say 20% on the start. And you see the noise is reduced a little bit more. The other thing you can do is there is a curve slider here. So this bar here, if I take it all the way to the left, you can see some of that noise comes back in. So I'm going to move it over maybe to around about 80 on that scale. And so we've got a nice optimized noise level, in my opinion. The next thing we want to do is go ahead, and you'll see here some of the blue, green, red channels aren't quite that well aligned. And what you can do is you can do an auto RGB balance. If I click on that, it kind of brings those curves a little bit closer together and adjust the color a little bit as well. There's also an auto white balance. If I click on that, it makes it a very, very subtle change to the white levels or the white balance levels in the image. You can play around with the different saturation and vibrance. So, for example, if I take the saturation all the way to the right here, you can see that the colors are very, very rich, but a little bit unnatural looking. So if I double click on that cursor, it takes it back to the default. The next thing is to look at tools. So there's several tools here that you can make use of. The first one is a deconvolution tool, and it gives a description here of what that tool does. So it sharpens up some of the luminous detail. And so if I click on that, and I'm going to raise this up, I'm using my mouse wheel to increase the values a little bit. And if I go quite a bit, you can see there is some more sharpening that takes place. We don't want to go over the top, otherwise the image becomes a little bit unnatural looking. So let's dial that back down to about 4. You can also use contrast. And what contrast does is it kind of weights the sharpening towards high contrast edges. So we can zoom that up there a little bit. And that gives us kind of an optimal sharpen level. There is also a dehaze panel here. Sometimes in some of the images, you may get some color fringing around the edge of planets. I've seen it in Mars, where there's almost like sometimes there's a blue fringe. And so by enabling this, you can actually reduce some of that. So I don't see it in this particular Saturn image, so we'll leave that untouched. The other thing you can do is, just like in your programs such as Photoshop, GIMP, and Affinity, there's a levels and curves adjustment here. So you can kind of move this line here in the curve, maybe take the dot levels down a little bit and the light levels up a little bit, a little S-band there. And that sort of emphasizes some of the contrast between the blacks and the whites in the image. And so we'll leave that like that. There's also a local contrast enhancement as well, where if you click this, and you'll notice that when I do that and raise some of these values here, you can see that some of the contrast is kind of increased in the image. You don't want to go too crazy on this. Again, it may look a bit unnatural. So I'm going to dial this number, this strength back down to about 0.2, and we'll take the clip limit to about 0.5. Again, play around with it for yourself and see what kind of results that you get. One thing I will call out is, so we've gone through 1, 2, 3, 4 tabs now. What you can do, if you decide you just want to completely start over, you can either, in this one tab, you can reset current tab values. So that would just do it for this tools tab. Or you can do a reset all tab values. That will take you back to the starting point again. One of the other things that I'll call out as well is you can save this project. What that does is it saves all these settings across all of the tabs. And so it may save you a bit of time when you bring in your next Saturn image. You can just open up the project and it will apply all the settings that we've just done. Again, another interesting point to call out. Now, the next thing is interesting. So on the D-rind tab, you'll see here on Saturn, there's this almost like a rind effect on the left-hand side of the planet. And so what we want to try and do is kind of reduce that. So with this tool, if you enable de-rind, it will apply a mask to where you want the mask to be and then kind of soften the features under that mask. So the first thing we'll do is we've enabled it. Then we'll go in and we'll actually show what does that mask even look like by clicking here. And you see, okay, well, probably the last thing we want to do is have a mask and de-rind around the Saturn's rings and not all the limb of the planet. So we can actually go into Saturn mode, and that will exclude the rings from the mask. And the next thing we can do is we can determine where the extent of the mask takes place by arcing the mask. So if I click these numbers here on the right side, I'm using my mouse wheel, you'll see that it will make a start and end point on that mask. So let's just dial that back just a little bit more. You can see that it's changing there. And then let's take this one up a little bit and we'll just adjust that mask. There we go. So around those numbers there, you'll notice now the mask is only going to be applied to this part of the limb. So maybe we'll make it just a little bit bigger on the mask. There we go. And what I'll do is now is I can actually click on move these sliders here, excuse me, to kind of optimize the mask. And one thing I can do for the Saturn image is I can go ahead and move this edge. So what this does is this is the bandwidth. So that this little red part here, if I increase that, it will determine the bandwidth. So interestingly, if I go up to here, just so you can see some of the extremes, if I take it up to 60, you can see that band becomes really, really wide. It goes way, way into the planet, and we don't want that. Whereas if I go this way, all the way to the left, it becomes very, very minimal, which means we're not even touching that rind that we're trying to fix. So let's leave it around 20, 19 or 20, and we'll work from that. And then the next thing we want to do is we can determine how smooth we want that mass to be. And it seems to me it's about the right level of smoothness. Again, play around with this for yourself. And then the inset is how deep does that mass go into the planet's surface? So let's just take it up to 30. And you see it goes all the way into the planet. We don't want that. So let's backtrack. Let's take it around 7 or 8 and see where we land there. And so you see now the mask is right over that rind area. So if I deselect this, now you can see we've kind of reduced that rind a little bit. And if I disable the D-rind, you can see the difference. So now the rind comes back, enable, and now we've kind of softened that rind a little bit. There are other ways you can do this. You can go into a Photoshop extract, etc., and apply a mask and do some blurring. You can do it that way. So this is just one option for you in your workflow that you can play around with. So that's the D-rind. The next one is this tab here called orbital. And it's an interesting one. So you notice that in some of your planet images, sometimes you've captured moons, but they're really, really dim in the final image. So what this moon recovery does is it helps you bring out those moons. And particularly in, say, poor seeing conditions, or if the stacking program didn't do a great job of stacking the moon as well as the planet, sometimes you get sort of like oblong-shaped moons. We can fix that too. So I'm going to zoom out here in the preview. I'm going to enable moon recovery. And then the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and do a preview boost. So this doesn't change the image at all. But look at that. There's a moon that we would like to maybe try and take advantage of and see if we can optimize its look. You notice it's certainly oval shaped, so not great, but we can fix that. The way we do that is we click on Place Moon Circle, and then I'm going to hold my cursor in the middle of that dot here, and I'm going to drag out just a little bit, not too far. See if I go up to there, but try just to go out to the limb of that moon. So around about there maybe. And then what I want to do is reduce that preview area. And then now we're going to boost. So now we are changing the image. So I'm going to move this selector up, and you'll see that the moon will start to appear. And so there it is. And in fact, you can see the preview down there, look. So we don't want to go crazy on the brightness. We don't want to make it look unnatural or anything like that. So let's just dial that back a little bit. And one thing you can do is sometimes using this method, you get kind of a color cast on the moon. So if you want to, you can desaturate the color of the moon all the way if you want to. So now we're done. Interestingly, if there were other moons that had showed up in this image, we could also select those as well. But in this case, I only saw this one moon appearing. So we click on I'm done placing, and then moon recovery is complete. And look at that. We've got the moon is now appeared. And it looks fairly circular, at least to me. So we've got this original view and we've got the process view. And some people may say, well, you know, I don't really want to see the original view anymore. I'm kind of done with that. You can actually click this button here and that original view goes away. And we just click on a refit back here. So it gives you a bit more real estate to play around with the image. processing previews. And then the last thing I want to show you is this batch mode. So this gives you the ability, if you want to add in a whole bunch of your image files here, select those, and then if you wanted to, you can actually go ahead and process all of those files with the same settings that we've just gone through. And also there's a little preview box here. It's kind of hard to see, but this tells you that all of the image files will be rotated to the same extent and match. And you can even do things like you can do animation of your images. I'm not going to show it on this Saturn one because it's not really optimal. But you can also do things like refresh the summary. So this gives you a little box here. It says, here's all the things I'm going to do to your images based on your workflow. And then you just click on Run Batch. So that's it for this just introduction of this Kepler program preview. As I say, it's very much a prototype. We'd love for you to play around with it. I'll put the link into the GitHub download. It's free. It's open source. It's being actively developed. And yeah, thank you very much for your time. Thank you.